Hello everyone, in case someone is already here. Hello everyone, in case someone is already here. I'll wait for you. Hello Yaro, nice to see you. If you have already joined, of course, you're welcome to say hi and where you're from and what brought you here and in particular issues. It's always good to know each other's background. Okay, so I think it's 7 p.m. in my part of the world. So let's just start. Hello, Piotr. Okay, so the title is The Secrets of Multi-tenancy in Rails. There you can see a nice lady walking through some kind of labyrinth. I thought this is a good metaphor to what I want to share with you, because that's what our work sometimes is. And let's first define what multi-tenancy is. I guess it's not the coolest way to start a presentation with the definition, but that was actually quite interesting. When I made a poll on Twitter recently, I tried to come up with 4 levels of multi-tenancy that I could think of, and ask people, do you think this is already a multi-tenant system or not? So you could see the results are pretty much evenly spread. So at the very bottom, you've got a kind of classical approach where you just put every tenant's data in a single table and know them apart by tenant ID. So 1/3 of the people told that this is the only thing you can call multi-tenant. The other types of systems, they're no longer to be called multi-tenant in the perspective of this users. Yeah. So the third option is a situation where you only share the DB, but the tenants live in a separate tables. Yeah, which I'm gonna talk about more today. For example, like Postgres schemas, yeah? So 20% people said this is where multi-tenancy begins, yeah? And then the second option, going from the bottom up, the second option was when you only share the application. You've got completely separate DBs, but you still share the application, meaning the data cannot obviously leak from one DB to another, but multiple customers' data actually go through a single process, yeah? So 27% people said this is where multi-tenancy starts, yeah? And even if you go even higher, imagine a system where you still serve multiple tenants, but you only share code. The tenants only, every tenant has its own application, DB, full stack, yeah? This is the only the code is shared, yeah? Is it still multi-tenant? My personal answer would be the second option, where you share an app. This is where we start talking about multi-tenancy, but still almost 20% people picked the first answer, which is really interesting. That says that multi-tenancy is really an overloaded term, which a lot of people think differently about, yeah? But still, my definition would be if you serve multiple independent customers somehow from one application, you're doing multi-tenancy. You have to come up with a tenancy model, which I'm gonna talk about more today. So, having defined the topic, let's now jump here. Here's a couple images. I think I have already shown them on another webinar from this series, and I tried to depict to show connections from the tenancy models to the construction world, yeah. And a lot of people would probably agree that the high-rise apartment is probably what you could call the approach where you share the DB or even the table, whereas the nice suburban neighborhood is something that that represents the approach where you have separate DBs, yeah. And the stadium, maybe we can imagine this represents a non-multi-tenant application where everyone basically participates in one thing, like Facebook or whatever, yeah. So I guess I heard a lot of people in the Rails world actually deal with multi-tenant systems. I heard the numbers are like really huge. If this is also the case for you, if you deal with a multi-tenant system on a daily basis, you can leave a reply. Now, let me go to this picture, because one comment over the internet made me actually find even better illustration for the row-level multi-tenancy, where you have one table where you store each tenant's data separated by tenant ID column. One could say this is like having everything in one place and just sticky notes on top of the things to tell what belongs to whom. Yeah, so that means not much separation. Okay, not to say that this is the wrong approach, which we're gonna talk about soon. Let me just briefly talk about the two projects I worked on recently, where we took different approaches to multi-tenancy. So project A was an inherited project, like most of those that we deal with. it was quite messy, and it was on row level multi-tenancy, which is where you put all customers' data in one table, only separated by the tenant ID column. Yeah, and basically the domain was pretty serious. It was accounting, and when we have analyzed the risks, the biggest risk was data leaks. Yeah, and while on that project, we actually dreamed of better isolation, of anything better than tenant ID column. Yeah, because actually that was the biggest risk in the case of this project. Yeah, even if we lost money in this application, that wouldn't be such a big deal, like leaking the data. Yeah. Okay. So that was the one project I worked on recently, and here's a story. I actually had Google Docs leak data to me one time. So that just says that leaking the data, that's a serious issue in multi-tenant systems, especially at such scale. Yeah. Google Docs leaked data. I mean, I have just shown someone else's document completely unrelated to me, with some customer data and a lot of actually sensitive data. Okay, so data leaking is a serious issue. So project B, there the story was different. It was an existing single tenant code base. One could say it was the level 1 in the Twitter poll that I told you about, where there were actually many customers, but everyone had a completely separate stack, starting from the application to the DB itself. And our job was, among others, to create a multi-tenant instance where one instance would handle a lot of tenants. Yeah, there were not so many tenants. Yeah, and the code base was quite big, existing one, and there we went for schema level approach, where you basically have a separate set of tables for every tenant. You can achieve it in a lot of different ways. For example, with PostgreSQL schemas, which I'm gonna talk more about today too. We went for it as it made sense, as a good stepping stone, as a good intermediate step. Yeah, because it's not so easy to migrate an existing system to a row level approach, because you have to basically put the column everywhere, put the filters everywhere. I wouldn't like to do such a job, basically, but schema level approach is way more easier to integrate into an existing solution. And schema level multi-tenancy. So basically, you can think of it like having a separate set of tables for each tenant. Yeah, you've got something like PostgreSQL schema, which holds, which is a namespace for a table, for a set of tables, and you can have a separate one for every tenant, and you basically set a session variable called search path to the current tenant. Yeah, this is the search path belongs to the Postgres session, which is the current connection. So this is where this piece of state lives. We'll get back to it later. But when a Rails developer has to implement something, what does he do? I could ask you this question, but I'm pretty sure you would agree that he just puts this phrase to Google Rails multi-tenancy gem, we Rails developers start to look for gems for everything, which is something good to say about our community. And actually, there's a couple of solutions to do just that in Rails. One of the most popular ones was or is Apartment. Maybe you've heard of it. Brief introduction. It handles a couple strategies. Yeah, you can have separate DBs, you can have separate PostgreSQL schemas, and so on. It doesn't really deal with row-level multi-tenancy. It is quite useful. We used it, but currently it's worth saying that it's not really maintained, and you have to look for a fork or just maintain it yourself. And let's just have a look how this works in Apartment. So this piece of code is what happens when you switch to another tenant. Yeah. So this is something you typically do when you handle a new request or when you handle a new background job. You have to tell the DB what tenant you're going to handle. Yeah, and this is a piece of code that runs. It basically sets this property on the Rails DB connection. It's interesting to see that even the comments say that this is not the way you should use this piece of active record code, but still people do it and this works. So this piece of SQL is what's getting executed at the beginning of every request you handle. You're basically saying, this is the tenant I'm going to handle. Please now give me the tables of this tenant. Okay, now let's compare some approaches to multi-tenancy, what to use and when. I think this is especially interesting. There's a couple aspects you can compare while talking about those three approaches. So again, row level is when you have one table for, let's say, users or products, and you have a tenant ID column, and all your customers' data lives in this single table. You just tell it apart by appending where closest to your queries. Then you've got schema level, where you have basically namespaces for tables. Yeah, so a separate set of tables for every tenant, like tenant 1 users, tenant 1 products, and then tenant 2 users, tenant 2 products, and so on. And DB level, this is when you have a completely separate DB for each tenant. Yeah, of course there's more nuances here and kind of intermediary approaches, but let's compare this simplified set. Okay, so you want to take into account the tenant setup time. So how long does it take to actually instantiate, create a new tenant? Yeah, because on the row level approach, it basically takes no time. Yeah, but on the schema level approach, you basically have to create a schema and to create the whole set of tables, of which there might be like hundreds. Yeah, and on the DB level, so you basically have to create a whole new DB. Yeah, so obviously it takes way more time with the other two approaches. Leaking data, what I have already talked about. In row level approach, that's a serious threat. Yeah, if you have like the naive solution where you just do it all manually, then basically if you forget to put the where close to your query, you end up with leaking customer data. This is what we actually feared while working on the other accounting system, which had row-level multi-tenancy. And if you go for schema level or DB level, yeah, that's obviously way more isolated. I have made the distinction between DB level and schema level because actually, while working on the schema level for one client, there were so many pitfalls where we could still leak data, which I'm gonna talk about soon. Here's a nice illustration from two types of trains. Two types of trains in this is, I believe, you can meet this kind of trains in Eastern former Soviet Union countries, and basically the first one is not so well isolated. You basically sit with everyone else. There's sleeping places, and this is the kind of level of isolation one could represent with row-level approach. Okay, now let's talk about invasiveness. So, I mean, how it affects the way your code base and database looks. So, if you have row-level approach, you basically have all of your code affected with this aspect of your application, which is to which tenant is belongs, because you have to have the filter everywhere, you have to carry the param everywhere, you have the column everywhere. Yeah. So that adds a lot of noise to the code. Yeah. Schema level, yeah, less of it. Yeah. The same with DB level. Shared tables. So when looking for a approach to take in multi-tenancy, it's good to ask the question: are you going to need shared tables, which different tenants would need to access, or which are you going to merge data across tenants? Again, this time in row level, this is basically no-brainer. In schema level, this is still doable because you can access the other tenants' tables by fully qualifying the table name. But in the DB level, it's almost not doable without creating another intermediary database or merging the data in process. Okay, DB migrations. That's something quite obvious, but still people not always think about that. But in row level, that just goes like every single migration in a basic application. But with schema level, you have to run your migrations on every single tenant, on every single set of tables. So if you have like 100 tenants, your migrations take 100 times that long. If you have 100,000 tenants, that becomes a problem. Conventionality, by which I mean how much does the approach adhere or fit to framework assumptions, in this case, Rails. So row level is just plain old Rails, nothing really special. Yeah. Schema level, it requires some intervention here and there, and it sometimes challenges the Rails assumptions. Like for example, I will show it later. The distinction between global and local and per tenant migrations. 7, additional costs. Is there any other cost you need to take, like paying more for your hosting? With row level approach, not really. Just a normal DB. Schema level, still it's just 1 dB, although I haven't seen providers who charge you per schema, but with the dB level, I can imagine there's a being a price for a number of dBs. Yeah. Okay, operational overhead. Meaning, are there any other special tasks you need to somehow sometimes do related to the maintenance of this particular approach? With row level, nothing special. Schema level, sometimes on Heroku you can read a mention when they where they say that backups become problematic when the number of schemas is above a certain number. And if you run multiple DBs, then yeah, you have multiple DBs. I guess this means a lot of way more maintenance. Of course, everything can be turned into a process, but this is something you need to take into account. Complexity. Complexity. So how much does this particular approach make your code more complex? So with row level, you basically have this param everywhere. Yeah. With schema level, you don't, but still, as I'm going to show later, there's a lot of interesting problems that can come up. 10. Where is a particular approach possible? Because we often run managed DBs these days, like even Heroku or DigitalOcean or whatever, and it will go, I guess, even more into the direction of managed services and platforms. And row level is pretty much possible everywhere. Schema level, not always. Yeah. Because you can have some restrictions, or basically it may turn out that you won't be able to do some special operation because of some ownership issues. Tenant switching. So we talked already about tenant creation. How long does it take? But tenant switching, the operation you basically do in every single request and every single background job, how long does this take? In row level, basically it's no time. Tak? In schema level, you have to make a short SQL statement, which is quite negligible, I would say, but still a SQL statement. But with DB level, you basically have to switch the database. Yeah. So in case of MySQL, that might be not that long, because MySQL DBs, as far as I know, work in this aspect similarly to PostgreSQL schemas. But in PostgreSQL, you have to instantiate a new connection if you don't have it instantiated already. So that's becoming difficult. Extracting data of a single tenant or cloning a tenant, it may not sound like something typical to do, but we actually did this a lot. Yeah, we wanted to replicate a certain tenant, to do some testing, to see how it works, to debug some issue. And with row level, it was problematic. With schema level, it's way easier. So if this is something you think you're gonna do often, then worth thinking about. Customization, which means some tenants may want to have some custom features to which are related some custom DB fields or DB structure. So in row level approach, you basically you cannot have a different schema. You still can go for some JSON fields or null fields, but in the schema level, you can have differences in the schemas, in the DB level, of course, even more. I'm not saying this is a good thing to do. A lot of application owners, product owners would are like to reject customers' customizations, but a lot of people just have to do it. Okay, so basically, when it comes to which approach to take, there's a couple circumstances where the decision becomes quite easy. If you have a lot of tenants, then probably row level. If you have a lot of low value tenants, like users that will never pay or never even access your account, but you still have to keep it, then still probably you don't want to take a cost of running the migrations and maintaining it for someone who doesn't bring any value, in any business value to you. But what if there's less tenants and they are high value? Then schema level or DB level can make more sense. If you're anxious about data isolation, consider schema level. If you need more data isolation for legal reasons, again, even the DB level can make sense. If you're on a managed DB, then make sure you actually can do the schema level approach, because this is not always the case. If you multi-tenantize, so to say, an existing single tenant code base, then implementing row level is way more difficult than on a greenfield project. Yeah. So for the first one, I would recommend schema level approach, at least as a stepping stone. And for the greenfield project, you're basically free to go with whatever one you want. If you need to combine a lot of data across tenants, then it's worth the row level will be just a safer bet. Okay, and there's some interesting strategies in between those approaches. As I mentioned in the Twitter poll, you can sometimes just have the application shared and achieve. You can either share it or not. So if you need an extreme level of isolation, consider even the data leaks that can happen because of the fact that process is shared across tenants. Because data can leak if you have some global variables or such things. Prefixing table names. If your particular database doesn't really do namespaces, I've still seen people do this schema approach by just prefixing table names, which is basically, one could say, the same thing. I think WordPress works this way. Okay. You can go for a row level and schema level hybrid. So if you are not sure which approach you're going to take in the end, and you're really anxious about locking in and you would like to keep the options open, you can go with row level and schema level at the same time. So still keep every tenant in a separate schema, but in a separate DB, but keep the row level column everywhere. Yeah, so then you can presumably switch when there's a specific circumstance. Okay, row level security is an interesting keyword because you can basically have tenants in a shared table, but you can employ some ownership rules. But this has to deal with the connections, so it's not so easy as it sounds. Sharding. So you can already understand that the schema level or DB level approach becomes a problem when the number of tenants grows. Yeah, because what if you have like 1,000 tenants in a single DB? Yeah, but obviously, if this goes so far, you can still split them across a couple DB servers. Yeah, so that's still a solution. Okay, some pitfalls and caveats of the schema level approach, which I found particularly interesting, because this is the approach where everyone assumes I'm just safe, no data leak can ever happen, whereas we had like a couple situations where we would certainly leak data if we didn't find out about the issue. State of apartment game, I have already talked about that. PG bouncer. You can tell if you got PG bouncer in your stack. That will be interesting to see, because I'm actually interested how many people use it. But it is a default part of some managed DB setups, yeah. And PG bouncer is a let's say a proxy between your application and your DB server to limit the number of connections you can make to your DB server. And it works in a three modes: transaction mode, statement mode, and session mode. Basically, if you run on transaction mode, which is often the default, you can end up mixing tenants' data, because the DB connections, so the Postgres session is actually shared. So this is how you can, make a little experiment, how this works. Okay, so another thing, multiple threads. This is not something people often do, but if you happen to spawn threads inside your request or inside your background job, we actually once did that. You need to make sure that every connection that this thread makes is also has also the search path set properly. Okay. Yeah, in the previous case, of course, if you don't do that, then weird things can happen. Multiple connections. So this piece of code looks actually ridiculous, because why would you make a separate DB connection in another active record class? But this is what we actually had in one project, because in legacy projects, a lot of weird things happen. And in this case, you basically have a separate connection pool. So let's say by default in RISE application, you have maximum five connections in one connection pool. If you do this kind of thing, you have another connection pool with another 5 connections, and you need to make sure you set the search path correctly for it. Now, all these previous issues were kind of related to the statefulness of search path, or more precisely, it's related to where does the search path state live. It happens to live in Postgres session, and that's why some problems happen. If we manage to keep it somewhere else, like in process, a lot of issues go away and the solution is overall more robust. So here's just a proof of concept. We haven't tried this in production. The first snippet is how simplified version of how this tenant switching works by default in most solutions like apartment. And the other is what we could do if we tried to avoid session state at all costs. Yeah, we could basically keep switching the table names. We could keep switching the table names in active record classes by the table name attribute. This is a This is, of course, a proof of concept, but I think this could work and this could make sense. Okay, that's a minor issue. Postgres extensions like HStore, L3, PG Crypto. Basically, you have to move them to a separate schema. And the only thing to make sure is that you can actually do it on your DB setup. Because on managed DBs, it's not always possible. Delayed jobs SQL tables. So I guess a lot of you are familiar with delayed job. It's like a background processing queue, like Sidekick, but the jobs are stored in the SQL table. And I like the solution, and it has a lot of pros in some cases. And if you now go with PostgreSQL schemas, you basically want to keep the jobs in a shared table, because otherwise you would end up with a separate background worker for every tenant, which is probably what you don't want to do. And introducing shared tables is basically doable in a manner similar to the proof of concept code that I shown before. Basically, you substitute the table name, and this is basically how shared tables work in Apartment, which has this kind of feature. Okay, plugging in the middleware. If you do this Apartment solution of schema level approach, you typically switch the schema not in the controller, but in a callback, not even in a controller filter, but probably in the middleware. Yeah, this is how Apartment does that. Makes sense. But in this case, make sure you put it high enough in the middleware, because if it's below a certain other piece of middleware that happens to use Active Record, then you've got a problem. Yeah. So in our case, we need to put it above the Active Record session management middleware. Okay, this is again a minor issue, but it shows an interesting thing, namely you have to run the migrations for every tenant, of course. If you sometimes want to do something like a global migration, then you can make an ugly if like this, yeah. But this shows shows the fact that the schema level approach is sometimes at odds with Rails assumptions. Rails never expects there being multiple ever-growing list of tenants, yeah. So that basically means surprises can happen, yeah. I believe we have dealt with all of them, but still. Okay, I think we are pretty far. So now let me ask the question: did you learn something useful today? I'm eager to see your comments. Yeah, I can see there was quite a lot of discussion. So, did you learn something useful? If yes, then leave me a comment. Oh, so much discussion. Haven't expected that. Okay, I'm quite curious to see the comments later. Okay, so let me jump to the two last parts of the webinar. The last one being the Q&A session. You can ask whatever you want, and I will gladly share my opinion. And before that, I want to do a pitch. You know, we have digged this topic of multi-tenancy quite a long time. We wrote a lot of blog posts. We did, I think this is the second webinar, yeah, we would basically do something more. We were thinking about a video course before, but I think we are not at this stage yet. But still, I wanted you to offer something, namely a service called Rails Multi-tenancy Consulting. So if you like this content, if you have a specific issue you would like to talk about, you can go and purchase this service for $80. We will jump on a 45 minutes video call on screen share, and we can deep dive into your particular Rails multi-tenancy issues. I'm actually really eager to jump on these calls with you if you happen to need this kind of service. I will put the link in the comment section soon, and you will be able to jump to it if you want. I will also send it in the mailing. I think yeah, the offer is limited to just the first 10 buyers, because obviously you can't handle that much. Yeah, unrestricted amount of people this way. We would like to help you. We feel we have some knowledge. If you think we could help you, there's an open way to do it. I will send the link in the comments section. So now, Q&A. If there's any particular question, just put it in the comments and I will gladly have a look. Okay. I think I have already posted the link, so if you want to go for the consulting, then yeah, we would be glad to do it. Let me now look at the questions. Okay, I think I wonder where to. What was the first question? Yaro. If you were creating a greenfield project today, what would you use? Yeah. I just as there's no blind decision you can make. If I were to make a completely blind decision, I would probably go for the row level approach. If I knew no other factors, yeah. If I didn't know anything about the project, about the environment, I would go for row level, because this is the one where you won't end up in. You can always sort out the issues, yeah. But in schema level or DB level approach, if now it happens that you have like 1 million tenants the next day, then you screwed, yeah. But it's very very seldom you don't know anything, yeah, and we can make better decisions, yeah. Also, the hybrid approach is interesting. So row level plus schema level in situations where you don't know anything. If you were going to start a new multi-tenant from scratch, how would you do it? So that's quite similar to the previous question, if I understood this correctly. Thanks, Kelvin, for asking. Yeah, I would probably start just with the row level approach. Yeah, we also at Arkansas we stick to a lot of the DDD CQRS patterns, and yeah, when it comes to things like tenant ID, a lot of these you can, for example, guard against that by having command schemas and validation and so on. Yeah. So yeah, not so sure about the approach to multi-tenancy I would take, but we definitely stick to a lot of the DDD CQRS patterns by default in our projects. How would you handle paid subscriptions in a schema level multi-tenancy app where you need to check if a customer paid the subscription in many requests? I'm not sure I understand the question good enough. Thanks for asking, Divide. That has to deal with the situation where you need to somehow access the data from another schema. I'm not sure what many requests means. Okay, I don't think I understand, but you can reach me out on Twitter, and because I'm kind of puzzled by the many requests phrase. Okay, so if I understood you well, Divide, in the schema approach, you're free to access other schemas. Yeah, you're not separated from it like in the DB approach. Yeah, you can just access the public schema or any other schema by prefixing the table name manually in your query. So if you want to access public.subscriptions, then you just do select from public subscriptions. If you want to stay with active record, you set the table name public.subscriptions instead of tenant1 subscriptions. Yeah, so this is pretty much doable with schema level approach. Yeah, just like the example with delayed job I have shown before. Okay, we're 50 minutes into. If there's any other question, then I would gladly read about that. I think let's call it a day. I will stay for another couple of minutes to read the previous part of the comments. But for those of you that don't want to stay any longer, thanks a lot for attending. I really liked having you here. Check out the consultation package that I have linked in the comment. And thanks a lot again. Have a good evening. Depends on your time zone. And I will still look at the comments from the beginning. Okay. Yes. Yara washes the hands. Nice. Hi, Piotr. Oh, legacy app, Rails apartment. Interesting. Interesting how it goes. The people's experiences with multi-tenancy, that's really, really interesting. Yeah, there was a huge discussion on Hacker News where someone just made an innocent question about DB level multi-tenancy, and with like hundreds of answers, pretty hot. Some people hated the DB level approach or schema level approach. Some people hated the row level approach. Yeah. So the discussion was kind of a lot of interesting experiences. Yeah. And I'm also really interested in listening to your experience. So if we can connect on Twitter somehow or via mail, anyway, then that would be really interesting for me. Yaro, I'm building row-based multi-tenancy projects for the last few years. Studied all the info there in the web. That would be interesting to read some of. If you can write a blog post, I would gladly read it. Yeah, if you can link it, or yeah, then I would gladly read it. Hi, Pavel. I am a Ruby Rails dev from Romania. Hi, Petru. Assist software. Share code. I guess this was the answer to what is the beginning of multi-tenancy. Yeah, makes sense. Some people think that too. Row-based sounds a lot easier to deal with, even if code implementation requires some added complexity. I assume it can be isolated either with Rails model features, Ruby inheritance, or some singleton. Yeah, I think this might be the safest bet in the general case. Yeah. Also, you have solutions for Postgres like Citrix, which help you easily shard the database in this situation. Tenancy seems to add a sort of hidden global state that can be harder to trace. Yeah, that's true. That's true. But still, in situations like we had, where it transitions up existing project, that was a viable approach. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Would you mix and match in the same app? I'm not sure you mean row level or schema level. The row level, schema level makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense in the situations where you're really uncertain about what comes next and you don't want to be locked in. Yeah, the hybrid approach makes sense. Yeah. Row-based to me feels easier to manage if you're working solo or in a small team. Yeah, I would agree. Oh, that's an interesting comment, because it's not particularly related to multi-tenancy, if I understand this correctly. How do you cope with increasing number of columns in a tenant table? I caught myself having 150 of columns, including tenant-specific settings. Dividing it to one-to-one associated tables is a way to go? Not really. Actually, that if you brought up this question, let me, Piotr, are you still here? not sure if you're still here, but this is a problem that really often happens, not only with the tenant table, but you often have some kind of table which has like massive amounts of columns, yeah, often the user or product or whatever, and we solve it by the DDD technique called bounded contexts. So often, if you have a tenant model, it's often a couple models hidden in there, yeah? So there's some boundary that goes through your model, through your entity, to call it this way, and we try to find the bounded contexts and put every one to a separate model. If this is something you really care about, then make sure to read some more about the DDD related topics on our blog or on in our books. Contact me on Twitter. I can point you to something later, because this is a really interesting question. Just to get back to it shortly, we actually had a small tenant table at the very beginning, and even when it had like less than 10 columns, it turned out that actually there's 3 different things in there. So the customer wanted to handle the tenant switching and secondly, account invitations and subdomain validation. He wanted to put it all into a single table. Yeah, sounds like simple, and a lot of people would just do that because this is the Rails way. But you run into problems like conditional validations, like some callbacks, like some null fields. If you see these kind of things, you're probably mixing a couple entities, couple bounded contexts inside one model. So definitely look for other resources about bounded contexts, DDD. Yeah, 10,000 schemas sounds crazy, definitely. Yeah, a JSON settings field sounds like a solution, but it can hide something, yeah? If you actually put a couple different entities into one model, you will run into problems, just as I said, conditional validations, null fields, and so on, yeah? But it probably makes things more simple than 150 columns. Yeah, it feels crazy, but I've seen tables like that. Then some interesting discussion follows about that. I won't get into detail. Thanks for the discussion, really interesting. Oh, you have a lot to share, Josek. Interesting story. Yeah, that was you're talking about the picture with the train types. That was Ukraine. I come from Poland, but I liked to travel to Ukraine, and there they got this type of trains where people sleep in one big shared space, which is really interesting and a lot of really easy to meet people. Access tenant, yes, some people also use that. Have had to deal with a lot of issues getting apartment and Sidekick play nicely. Interesting. Thanks for sharing. Interesting. I would gladly hear more. Migrated acts as tenant. Nice. So you've got experience in this field, migrations. That's interesting stories. Yeah. Why did you pick apartment was the question. Yeah, and a lot of people just pick whatever is the most popular game, yeah? That's the mentality, I guess, not only of our community, but a lot of programmers do whatever is more popular because that won't get you fired. We had issues with tenant switching in situations where Sidekick threads, for example, are switching concurrently. Interesting stories, yeah? So we touched on it too. Oh, yeah. I'm happy you have learned something, Lee. Yeah, you're right to say, Yaro, by the way, thanks for your comment and facilitating the discussion. I can see you stand behind a lot of it. Yeah, actually, a lot of this lecture is about what I have already written in the blog posts. You can find them. Whatever is your way to consume content. Some people prefer reading, some people prefer listening. Okay, thanks for appreciation, Lee. Thanks, Pavel. Thanks, Divide. Yaro. Okay, so I would call it a day. I will gladly get back, jump to bed, and thanks a lot for being here. Have a good time. Bye-bye. And yeah, the consultation. If you wanna buy it, then I will send the link again. And that would be it. Bye-bye.